Hi everyone, patch 2.3.1 is live and there were a bunch of different updates and buffs in there, not just for builds, but also, for example, for Nightmare Dungeons, Legions, and in general there seems to be like a bit of a better material economy now. One of the things I tried is also the Forgotten Wisdom affix, the experience globes that you can get when you farm Nightmare Dungeons, just to see if they are kind of like worth anything right now. And it turns out that's not really the case, I gotta say. So I'm talking about this update here. They say that the Forgotten Wisdom affix for Nightmare Dungeons has been adjusted, and if you had tried this like earlier in the season, you probably noticed that it barely did anything. It is somewhat effective at very low levels, so when you're leveling 1 to 60, before Torment for example, these dungeons are actually pretty decent, especially if you have sigil powder lying around. You can just craft a bunch of these sigils, start blasting, and you can actually level up to 60 relatively fast. But then once you go into the Paragon territory, it is just not really the same, and you don't really get any XP at all. So for example here of my Paragon 281 character, well, which is arguably pretty high already, so I wouldn't expect to really see like a massive gain or something like that. But just looking at those XP values here, I was getting 20,000 on Dawn 4 for one of those Forgotten Wisdom globes. And my required XP per level is something like 400 million or something like that at this point. So I need a lot of globes, basically. So the TLDR for me was, this is pretty worthless if you're trying to farm paragons, but it is pretty good for leveling. Now there was another pretty big update here though, and that one is actually way juicier. So we have the Legion event update here with more salvage mats and Forgotten Souls in Torment difficulties. And I gotta say, Legions are back in a pretty big way. They are pretty good now. So I have some screenshots here from like a before and after. This is a Legion event right now. This is my material tab. You see here I have like 38.9k herbs, 194 iron chunks, 218 rawhide, etc. The one thing that people were really mostly looking forward to are crystals and Forgotten Souls, because usually this stuff is not really a problem, but especially, you know, people that trade a lot and then masterwork their gear a lot because they have way too much gold, they eventually run out of Forgotten Souls most of the time, or they make crystals. So exactly those two materials seem to be like the biggest bottleneck in the game. Even if you keep blasting bosses and you farm souls there and you salvage a lot of stuff, eventually you might have trouble here. Now, not really me, I've been playing a lot, and I'm also just not, you know, giga masterworking every single piece to triple crits and stuff like that. But I know that people were really hoping for some fix. And it turns out it is pretty good. So this is one Legion event here. Look at our Veiled Crystals. We have 68.7. And now we go to the next screen here. This is right after looting the chest. I got around 700 Veiled Crystals. And we got around 200 Forgotten Souls. So this is just one Legion event that I can do in something like 2-3 minutes or so. And that is actually a relatively good income for this. So especially on the souls side, I think this is actually very valuable because, for example, the best way to get them otherwise is just keep spamming lair bosses. But of course, if you don't have infinite materials, you can't really do that. There's a bit of like a, you know, pre-farm involved with getting the mats in the first place. And even if you, let's say, have infinite Belial mats and you one-shot him like every 15 seconds, you get like, I think 7 Forgotten Souls per kill. So something like maybe 30 per minute or so. And it's just not really that high. But doing a Legion event, boom, you get like a stack of 200, and that actually felt pretty good. You also get a bunch of the other stuff here. So chunks went up like 1k, rawhide went 1k. I'm not sure if there were decimals involved here, but it's definitely a pretty decent amount. And yeah, also in general, it just seems like Legion events are pretty decent now. Now, some other updates in the patch were also that they just buffed and fixed some of the Nightmare Dungeon affixes that they introduced in Season 9. And one of them is the Horadic Material Reserve affix. So these just spawn like a bunch of little chests all throughout the dungeon. You can click them and then like a bunch of stuff pops out, including a bunch of Forgotten Souls and like these legendary salvage mats, I think, and stuff like that as well. So that was also improved a little bit, but I tried that briefly. I don't have the exact numbers on it. It felt like okay, but it's mostly something that is like supplementary on the side, I would say. So I wouldn't necessarily go and seek those out. Also some other stuff like equipment delve was fixed apparently, so that gives you like a cache at the end when you click those little artifacts, and they made the animation speed faster and stuff like that. So Nightmare Dungeons have gotten like a little bit of a buff here, and they're just like a bit more smooth to farm now as well. But ultimately, for example, for some of the materials like Forgotten Souls, you probably still want to just go bosses and legions, for example. And when it comes to farming experience, I estimate that Nightmare Dungeons are maybe in the range of like 20 to 25% of the experience gain that you could achieve in the pit. So they are pretty far behind, and they're even like far behind Infernal Hordes. Infernal Hordes is usually somewhere in the range of like half or so of the XP potential. And the pit is just kind of like the uncontested king when it comes to Paragon farming. So your XP just doesn't really move if you don't go pit, basically. What does move though is this Artificer stone count, and that is actually kind of interesting. So they added a kind of refund for your Artificer stone when you go into the pit. It costs 3 to open, but if you do a 70 plus, you get 2 to 3 stones back when you finish the boss. So you effectively almost infinitely sustain after that tier. And then when you go even higher, you actually get a surplus. So you can kind of just like stack up keys and, you know, use them for your ults or use them for pushing if you really want to try hard and, you know, throw like 1,000 attempts at clearing the super high tier or something like that. You can now very easily do that, and you don't actually have to go back and, you know, farm more Artificer stones in like random health heights or something like that if you ever want to try to do any kind of pushing, for example. So I guess that is a neat change. In Season 9, relatively useless because you get like 4,000 stones anyway for free. Plus we have a bunch of like incentives to actually go farm Nightmare Dungeons and kind of just like stack up those keys. But maybe in future seasons we get less of them in other sources, and maybe we don't get any from the season journey like we do now. And this is going to be a pretty nice change then. Overall, I have to say, it seems like a pretty nice update here for our Nightmare Dungeons. I hope that Blizzard keeps at it and keeps improving the system, because there are still affixes and Nightmare Dungeons that are just kind of like whatever. And I would also like to have maybe a bit more control over the affixes, especially in like the escalation sigils. And Astaroth also could be like kind of juiced up a little bit more, I feel. So let's see if they're still going to do any kind of tweaks. But at the very least, Legions are back. Forgotten Wisdom dungeons are awful, so maybe they would beef that up a bit and make some at least half viable choice of another alternative for Paragon farming, for example, but we'll see. And overall, it seems like a lot of the Nightmare Dungeon rewards have been boosted to a point where they're definitely quite worthwhile, at least early on in the progression. So that's my sum up here of like the overall game changes. I have a bunch more stuff coming in other videos, a bunch of build guides, so stay tuned for those. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time.